Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast where a behavioral scientist examines what it's like to live a humorous life. Glimpse into the lives of the funniest people in entertainment, business, and science as your host, Dr. Peter McGraw, explores their habits, motivations, and secrets to success. Get ready to fire up your brain and your funny bone. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast that looks at the lives of funny people. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is Jeff Kriesler. Jeff is a lawyer turned comedian, author, and champion for behavioral economics. His first book, Get Rich Cheating, was a satirical look at dishonesty. His second book, Dollars and Cents, How We Misthink Money and How to Spend Smarter, was co-authored with a previous guest, Dan Ariely. Jeff is also editor-in-chief of peoplescience.com, a thought leadership platform for applying behavioral science to the marketplace. Welcome, Jeff.
It's good to be here, Peter. Nice to finally meet you.
Yes, we've been in touch via phone and email for years, it feels like.
At least 4. I was working on with a healthcare company, and they hired me because they wanted to have humor in their AI interface, and then they wanted me to see if there was any real proof that humor worked. And I looked to you, and you told me, maybe.
as spoken like a true academic. Well, it depends.
Exactly. In the right context, the person.
So, Jeff, if you weren't working as a comedian, writer, or champion of behavioral economics, what would you be doing?
Probably have to fall back on the law degree to pay some bills, but I wouldn't be happy about it.
Yeah.
There are people for whom the law works. I'm not one of those people. But I tried a lot of things. I did everything that all the comedians and creatives you probably have. I did the bartending and the waiting tables and burning of my law degree, all the traditional stuff. So
wait, you did the waiting tables after law school or before?
After
law school.
I won't bore people too much, but basically went to law school right after college, and the weekend deciding whether or not to go to law school is its own next book. Mm-hmm. It was the day Jerry Garcia died. It was the day I arrived in San Francisco, and they said, you have 2 days to decide. And my girlfriend visited, and my mom didn't talk to me. It was a long thing. Anyway, I went to law school. It took some time off in the middle, moved to San Francisco after finishing, took the bar, and then I had opportunities to practice law. I went to Virginia Law School, so I had all the big firm offers, but I didn't want to do that, so give away my life. So I cobbled together my, day job. Sometimes it was document review, which was great because it paid better and I didn't have to work that hard. And sometimes it was the traditional sort of service industry stuff that people do, bartending and waiting tables. More bartending than waiting tables, and cater waitering. And I dressed up like a giant potato for Food Network, which is kind of funny. Eugene Merman?
Yes.
So he also did that. I didn't know him at the time, but that campaign that Food Network was running, he also did that at some point. I'm like, we're so close. Can I get on the show?
Potato Brothers.
Exactly.
I once saw Eugene Merman crossing the street on Sunset and stopped him in the middle of the street to say hello. We had met once before. He didn't remember me. All right. But you're not a lawyer.
I'm not.
Congrats for
Thank
that.
you.
Do you find that your lawyerly skills, training, or otherwise has served you in any way?
A lot of ways. The way that at least serves me and people think it does the most is about like handling contracts and stuff like that.
Sure.
I kind of know how to read a contract, but the way that I actually think it's helped me the most, or at least influenced me the most, is the way that I analyze situations. Like both a lawyer and a comedian, or a lawyer and a storyteller, I mean, more broadly, they will look at a situation and they want to repurpose it to tell their tale. Right? So a lawyer looks at like a car accident and breaks down all the elements of what's going on, the lights, the type of car, the drivers, and then tells a story to convince a jury, in this case, what he or she wants them to understand. A comedian looks at, people in a social situation or even the same accident and retells that story in a way that they want the audience to have a certain emotional reaction. They'll laugh. The same with storytellers, et cetera. So the law helped me understand about breaking things down into elements and then reshaping something to sort of essentially make an argument.
I see. I've never thought of it quite this way. This comes up in Hannah Gatsby's Nanette, where she, in the second half of her special, stops telling jokes and then retells the stories that the original jokes, the first half jokes, were based on. And she tells you what she omitted in order to make the joke funny.
Yep.
And so I suspect that comedy and law have that in common, is what, as a lawyer or comedian, do you omit in order to
right? And
make
what
your
do
goal
you enhance?
Yes. What to get exaggerate and what to omit in order to, and for different purposes, like comedians don't have the check, but lawyers say, well, that's what the adversarial system's for.
Yeah,
right?
there are rules that lawyers are supposed to adhere to, where the comedian's rule is be funny.
Yes.
I mean, essentially that's it. And in some ways, that was probably what attracted me to it. I really started thinking about comedy in law school when I was like really consuming a lot of new ideas and my mind was spinning, and the only outlet for it was like boring law stuff. And so that's when I started being the guy that carried around a notepad and wrote down things and had a tape recorder and had spare thoughts. And I was drawn to comedy because you could talk about anything. The only rule was you have to be funny.
Yes.
Whereas like the law, I wanted to be Thurgood Marshall or Thomas Jefferson. I wanted to save the world, but it was so rule bound, at least at the initial stage, that I felt stifled. And the comedy was like, just do whatever, just get a laugh. And
yes.
I'm the youngest kid, so that's easy.
And you care about rules, because you wouldn't write a book called Get Rich Cheating if you didn't care about rules.
Yeah.
Or breaking them, at least. No.
Well, it's interesting that thinking about caring about them is open to interpretation.
Okay. You notice them.
Yeah, yes, I do. I do notice them, and I notice how people consciously and unconsciously break them or led astray by people. And I also admit very readily to coming from privilege. You know, I was a prep school, Ivy League law school kid, and my ability to roll the dice and take a chance in comedy was because I had a law degree that all else fails. That's my safety net. And part of my privilege, what I saw is how certain groups that sometimes take advantage of the rules or they bend the rules. I mean, Get Rich Cheating is about, you know, everything from steroids to Donald Trump was in there. The book came out 10 years ago, to Enron, and how certain forces take advantage of the gray area, at least. So I certainly notice rules. I notice how people get around them. I notice how people manipulate them. And then, you know, the latest book and the latest work in behavioral science is sort of the flip side of that. Like, if the Get Rich Cheating was how other people trick you like out of your money so they can get rich, behavioral science is often, we can get more into about how we sort of fool ourselves, right? What unconscious forces guide us to poor decisions. And they both come together in a way. Sometimes we're tricked by others, sometimes by ourselves. And then sometimes a lawyer comes in to clean up, I guess.
Yeah. So I think the idea, I mean, and we'll talk a little bit about this, about dollars and cents, but how is it that you learn to follow the rules in order to build wealth? And that's something that, you know, I think the average person is not well educated as to what the rules are. They have the natural way that they go about reasoning and emoting in the world makes it difficult to be utility maximizers, to use the economist term for this, and having some utility maximizing tendencies is useful if you want to be old and wealthy versus old and poor.
Yeah. And that, what you just said was my first joke on stage, and it just didn't, I'm kidding. Everyone, welcome the utility maximizer. Hello. Hello. How are you? Are emotions in check today, sir? Good to see you. I will share with you now my big image of behavioral science and comedy working together.
Please.
And that is that I think of comedians, and I don't necessarily fall into the Seinfeld, Larry David style, but as an easy example, that style says, hey, did you ever notice people do the stupid thing? And the behavioral scientist or psychologist says, yeah, and this is why.
Yes, I see.
And I've always, it's probably a lot of self-justification for my career choices, but I felt like that fits together, sort of a yin yang. It's looking at the same, why do people do stupid things or things that are irrational or stupid?
Right. So you point out the stupid thing, then you explain the stupid thing.
Yeah. In an ideal world.
That lends itself better to pop science books, though, than to stand-up comedy.
Yes, it does. It was when I did the cheating book, which then became a tour in character. And I also had like a recurring segment on MSNBC in character, which is crazy that I do that.
Who's the character? The character's name
is?
The
Cheater.
Cheater.
Just me, Jeff Kriesler,
Yes,
the Cheater.
right.
It was sort of a Stephen Colbert meets Jim Cramer or Tony Robbins.
Got it.
Right? Like, you should cheat because cost-benefit analysis. No one gets caught. Benefit is millions of dollars, right? Don't steal a loaf of bread, like steal a bread factory, you know, aim big, think big. And I would go and I would like, what I found interesting to your point was that in the context of talking about cheating, it was like this gray area between the two, between comedy and the more psychology, because it really struck a nerve at people's core about what they were dealing with and what they sort of saw in society, the unfairness. I mean, this was, income inequality is a bigger deal now than it was 10 years ago, but it was still a big deal. CEOs making 2 billion times everybody else. And so it struck a nerve in the sense of psychology, but I tried to do it in a way that was humorous, right? Satirical, to make it more comfortable for people, as I'm sure you've discussed numerous times here.
Yes.
To digest that. And it had its moments, but what's interesting is that's how I met Dan Ariely, who you mentioned was another guest and brilliant. And he and I both had this experience that, he wrote a book about dishonesty.
Yes.
And more straightforward, my cheating, that people connected to it, but people weren't really excited to go learn about their flaws.
Yeah, so Dan has a number of books. The ones that sort of made him famous were focused on irrationality. Why do people make mistakes, essentially? And besides them being good books, they were sort of timed sort of perfectly in the marketplace. He was just early enough to capitalize on that brilliance. But the dishonesty book, hasn't really...
Yeah, I don't want to speak for him. My sense
the same
of it,
way. Yeah, no, I could say it. Yeah. I think it's fair to say.
I think it's the insights are just as well founded.
Yes,
I think organizations.
It's more of an organizational lesson than it is. I need to make my life better.
Right.
Like more personal development, self-help, motivation for a book like that.
I think it's framed like even the stuff, Predictably Irrational and our book that points out the flaws, it tries to frame it in a positive way, like here's what you can do about it. Whereas dishonesty, yes, there's maybe a lesson, but it feels a lot more like negative. Right?
Yeah, as I like to say, my critique of my own first book was that it solved a curiosity. It didn't solve a problem.
Interesting.
Or it satisfied a curiosity. It didn't solve a problem. I'm actually going to write that down because I'm working on my second book and I'm talking about the flaws in my first book. And
perfect. We can hit pause.
No, it's fine.
I can do elevator.
No one's listening, so it's okay.
Not yet.
So working on Get Rich Cheating is what started to expose you to the behavioral economics.
Well, it wasn't working on it, but when it came out, and I met Dan. So essentially, I researched Get Rich Cheating based upon the traditional tools of what did Enron do? How did the steroids play out? What was Donald Trump doing? I looked at all that. There were a couple books about cheating culture. A guy by the name of, I think it was David Callahan wrote it, but I never stumbled across behavioral science. I never stumbled across it at all. And I published the book and then Dan got a copy.
And what year was this?
2009 it came out.
All right.
So that was also right around
it was when this stuff was really starting to catch.
His book and what's it called? The other big book, Thaler's book.
Nudge.
Yeah, we're all 2008, 2009. So I went and spoke to his class and, I did it in character. Dan, I give major credit for trying stuff. Right?
Sure.
He introduced me as just someone with unique wealth building ideas. He didn't say comedian. I scrubbed it so it wasn't obviously that I'm kidding. It was still humorous. And I would tell these Duke graduate business students, hey, you should cheat, right? What's the big deal? Just don't have morality and you can make a fortune. And always about 20 minutes, I did it 3 or 4 times. Always about 20 minutes in, someone raised their hand and be like, are you full of crap? What are you doing? And then I put it to the class. And then
by the way, you should hire that person.
I should just
it's a nice little test. If you're whoever finally raises their hand,
who's willing to speak out and question
and just goes, "Are you full of shit?" Like that, you should hire that person. That's right. True. That's probably a strong candidate for whatever job you're interested in.
That is
hiring.
a good point. At the time, my only job was someone to fold my clothes when I went to bus tables later. Comedy, big money. So they'd ask that question and I put it to the class and usually a quarter to a third of them were sort of in a gray area. And it wasn't they were bad people. It just sort of confirmed for me what my basis of the Get Rich Cheating was, my uninformed basis, which was that money messes with our heads, right? It makes us do irrational things. I probably didn't use the term irrational. And so that was a light bulb moment for me. And then Dan and I worked on some other projects, big and small, some other ideas. I learned about his work and his peers. And I was like, holy crap, this is the thing. And it just, I had gone to Princeton. I got an economics degree. I'd gone to a top law school. I knew about that form of decision making. And in retrospect, and maybe self-justifying retrospect, none of those like systems for how people made decisions clicked with me because I was like, it's not how humans interact, right? Humans don't do supply and demand like that. We're driven by this emotion and what feels cool.
We don't reason like Greek philosophers.
No,
yes, that's
not
right.
at all. And the work of everyone in that field, as you well know, is sort of, I think of it as layering psychology on top of those traditional decision making, not ignoring, but saying, how does it really work? And so it wasn't while I was researching Get Rich Cheating, but it was as a result of that.
I see. When I got into the field, it was 10 years before that. And, I was enamored with, it was called judgment and decision making back then. And I was enamored with it. And it was really striking. People in the field sort of bemoaned, didn't have more of an effect in the world of policy, government, business, et cetera. And so now I couldn't have anticipated the change.
It's happening. Yeah.
And it has, it's really happening. For example, I used to teach my business students how businesses don't experiment enough. Now I teach how the good businesses do. Yeah. And how nimble they are. Yeah. And how they regularly make bets, and how that's become, part of the culture, in part because these CEOs have read these books and they have and are smart people. Yeah, that's right. And they can understand the basics of random assignment, and that A/B testing is not that crazy. And
especially when the big companies now are like an Amazon or an Uber, people that have these users that like interact in a way where it's easy to measure and tweak.
Yes,
I mean, Amazon can peel off 1 million users to A/B test something in a snap of a finger.
That's right.
Right? That you couldn't necessarily do that so easily in the traditional economy, right? So yeah, I see that myself and that more and more doing it. I sometimes try to check myself to know whether or not it's my blinders to think just because I'm looking for behavioral science, it seems like it's everywhere. But it does, as objectively as I can analyze it, it feels like it's more prevalent.
Oh, I have zero doubt about that. Now, the issue is it's not as prevalent as we'd like it to be because it's such a useful model and there's such useful tools. And so I think that there's a lot of room to...
It needs more jokes, then people will...
Well, that's, so before we get to dollars and cents, I mean, that's, I was just writing down a line I'm in the heavy editing phase for my next book.
At the other side, there is light at the end of the tunnel, whatever your metaphor is. I recently, Annie Duke.
I've never met her, but I read her book and I knew her from back when poker was popular. Yeah.
Anyway, you shouldn't meet, but I can. Anyway, I just saw her the other night. We were talking about book writing. She just finished a chapter, and I don't know about how you feel, but I hate writing. I love having written a book, but I hate writing. Yeah. So when you say you're in editing stage, I get a little tense myself.
And I understand why. I have to tell you this. I'm having a good experience.
Good.
I'm having a really good experience. Now, it helps that I'm writing about something that I know really well and something that I've thought a lot about and is well researched. And the topic is really fun.
And you're in LA.
I'm in LA doing it. And so the title of the book is called Shtick to Business.
Oh, nice.
And depending on when this gets launched, the book might be available for pre-order. There'll be a little teaser before this, if that is indeed the case.
We'll review it on People Science. That's a huge boost. That's going to just change everything.
Thank you so much. But it's serious business lessons from the masters of comedy. So it's essentially, what can we learn from these, these kind of misfits, these people who have this incredibly difficult job that they make look easy. And it's a look in behind the scenes at their personality and their practices and their perspectives.
Awesome.
To see what it is that makes them good. And so I forget why I brought this up.
But
the issue is that like these folks they may not be the, kind of pinnacles of utility maximization, but they actually do have really useful skills.
Absolutely.
And so translating them has been fun.
Yeah. I'm fascinated to read it because one of the challenges that I face in my career is, as I have joked a couple of times, and I'm sure you're aware, like being a comedian, you can or a writer in showbiz in general, in this town or any town, you can make it big, but you can't make a living. It's just hard to scrap together.
Yes.
And, you know, I have a young family, as many comedians, like if you don't make it big, do I want to be on the road 45 weeks a year, all that. So part of the process for me and how I ended up here was being able to think about my applicable skills or transferable skills, whatever the term is, because I think a lot of us that are comedians, we look at what we do and we're like, we're good at this, but it doesn't apply anywhere else. And it sounds like what your book helps reveal, and it's probably good for both businesses and comedians, is actually there's a lot there.
Yeah. I make the argument, for example, that vaudeville was the first lean startup. Mm-hmm. Right. So if you think about lean startup principles, minimum viable products, failing fast, et cetera, that is the stand-up comedian's process. Yep. And they've been doing it for years and doing it rather successfully, right? Limiting downside risk, having all this upside potential and so on. So that's, for example, that's like one of the ideas. I call it success by 1,000 cuts.
Huh. I like that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sounds painful, but
well,
the pain is accurate.
That's stand up.
Right, exactly.
That's exactly it. But it's just a cut, right? It's just a little cut. You never have a gaping wound.
Yeah, and the resiliency you learn through stand up is incredibly valuable throughout the rest of your life. Like I have a few theories about if I run the world, my version of Israel making their citizens serve in the army. One is that I think we should make all our citizens work in the service industry because there are a lot of jerks. And the second might be some version of trying stand up, but I don't want a lot of crappy stand up out there, but just
there's already enough.
Yeah, exactly. But there is, like, you know, you get up and you bomb and you fail, which everybody fails, and you realize life goes on. That resiliency is going to help you in everything else you do, I think.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's always the joke about people's worst fear is public speaking. I do. It's interesting. I don't talk that much about oral communication in the book, but I have an entire chapter about writing. I buried it in the middle of the book.
That's because, good
writing. Because I think it'll be like the least popular chapter for a lot of people, but the writing really underlies good stand-up. Yeah. And I think that the average person doesn't recognize that. Yeah. So you were talking earlier about having your notebook or your recorder, like that's the tool that people are using.
And for me, when I had those things before I even thought of stand-up comedy, then my first exposure to like what's a stand-up comedian was like, buy yourself a notebook and a recorder.
Yes, I've got one right here. I use it as a journal mostly, but
Well, the writing aspect of comedy has also helped me out, and I know many others. Like I wrote a speech someone gave at the 2012 Democratic National Convention, as sort of one extreme of the work, and comedians that work in other, like on TV, and whether it's comedy or serious. I mean, if you're in a bar in West Virginia, you don't have time for a long exposition. You got 2.5 seconds before they stop paying attention. And if you want to get your idea across, whether it's about men and women dating or about politics, you got to like refine your words to the syllable.
Yes.
And that is like, it's trial by fire, and you do it. And then when you suddenly are given like a blank page in a book, or like an audience that is actually paying attention, Mark Maron once told me it's like being in the Matrix. Like I met Mark Maron when I started my comedy career in San Francisco, and I'd just come off the road for the first time, and he was at the Punchline, and I said, hey, I want to do smart stuff, because I was a cocky little shit, like I see you do, but I'm faced with going on the road, and that's not what you get to do. And he basically was like, if you go on the road and you deal with all that crap, when you go to a good room, and we were in San Francisco Punchline, one of the great comedy rooms, he's like, it's like being in the Matrix, right? Like everything that comes at you is so, you can handle it so easily. And I think, and I'm not suggesting this is what your chapter on writing is, but when I think about what stand-up does for writing and communications, oral or otherwise, it's like, if you've done stand-up, any other like platform is easy. Right? There's just room to showcase those skills.
Yeah, I think, look, let's be honest. The average person who does stand-up never really becomes a stand-up.
Well, yeah, let's eliminate those chumps.
Because it's, it's just a big funnel.
Yeah.
And frankly, there's, I'm happy that it's a big funnel, because the people who come out at the end are incredibly good. Yep. But as a result of the funnel being, the mouth being so wide, I wouldn't encourage anyone to do it as a career. I might encourage them to do it as an experience. Right. I did it as an experience, and
it's
happy,
like improv. Like I wouldn't
it.
pay to see people do improv except for like the top, but I think everyone should do it. Right?
Yes. And I think the top is, it's worth, it's totally worth it.
I'm glad you said that. And I hope I didn't come across as critical of comedy. I think it's great. When I started in San Francisco as a comedian, not life. And it was the turn of the century, which I love. I can say that 2000, 2001. And there was no industry. Like it was post sitcom boom, and it was, post club boom, and the internet hadn't taken off.
Yeah, so it was
the only people,
lull.
It was a lull, and the only people doing it were either like just geniuses that had no choice or insane people. Mm-hmm. And I found it great because I was learning from the best, but at the same time, because that funnel wasn't as wide, it probably wasn't producing as many like diverse and different types of talent. I guess diverse and different types, same words.
Yes.
Whereas now, like I can't even keep track of all the comedians that are doing great work because there's so many. In addition to those that are doing crappy work.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's those things. So let's, I want to get into dollars and cents. Sure. So it came out last year?
2 years ago, actually.
2 years ago.
Recent,
okay.
2017. We can lie. The paperback came out last year if you want to make it seem fresh.
So let's talk a little bit. I'm super interested in these topics because it's related to work that I used to do, not that I do now. And then obviously I'm very interested in them because they're all personally rather relevant. Mm-hmm. I've always been good at delaying gratification. It's part of the reason why I've been successful in life. And so I was always kind of tuned into these issues of money, in part because of the way I'm wired, but then also because I grew up poor. And so, I grew up poor and had to be rational.
Yep.
And so you combine with the need to be rational with the ability to delay gratification. I've been very good about kind of creating a set of automatic behaviors that I'm not going to be old and poor, thankfully, which is really terrible. Young and poor is fine. Old and poor is terrible.
Well, you don't have a chance to learn from your mistakes.
Yes, that's right. Actually, being young and poor is sort of useful. So I want to talk to you about some of your favorite lessons and some of the things that all right, let's suppose the listener is dumb and won't buy your book, but they need to learn something. What should they learn?
Well, there are a few principles when it comes to financial decisions.
Jeff smiling when I said that.
Well, I mean, the ultimate lesson is don't buy my book, just listen to the podcast, and there you save $19. But I don't want people to hear that lesson. There are a ton of principles. I mean, the book is basically it's laid out saying how, intro to behavioral economics.
Sure.
It's not really for Dan Ariely fanatics because it's not.
They know this stuff.
It's not. It's just it's refocused and repurposed for financial decision making. So the big thing is this idea of opportunity cost, which may be a flashback or for listeners. Otherwise, it's just. When you spend some money.
So I'm going to interrupt for a moment only because this is an incredibly important idea. It's one that is not intuitive for the average person, and it's surprisingly understudied in the field.
Yep. But it underlies, I think, ultimately every financial decision and often every decision. Mm-hmm. Essentially, if you decide to spend money on something, the opportunity costs are all those things you're passing up, right? Yeah. All the things that you could spend that money on now or any time in the future.
I wish there was a better term for it than opportunity costs.
The Susie Orman $5 latte bull crap. There's nothing against Susie Orman, but the idea of her don't get the $5 latte is instead you can invest that and suddenly compound interest, you're going to retire at 25.
Yes.
Which is another argument. I say have the latte, enjoy yourself. Don't buy $1 million house when you can't afford it. That's a better thing to think about. But opportunity costs underlie every decision. They underlie, again, it's not just financial, but I think it was Harry Truman. Some president had a quote about essentially spending on war. And he's like, every battleship that we build is 200 schools we don't build, right? It's 40 whatever homes. It's all this other investment in things. And that's opportunity costs. If you're going to spend money, time, resources over here, you can't spend it over to the other side. So that underlies everything. But
well, especially because you're connecting this to saving.
Saving
right?
versus spending.
So a dollar spent is a dollar you can't save.
Right. Or a dollar you can't spend on something
or a dollar you spend on on X is a dollar you're not spending on Y, and that Y might have
healthcare, sneakers instead of healthcare.
That's right. Or it might be an asset or something like that. I get it.
The truth is, that's how you should think about money, but none of us even come close. And like you said, it's understudied. And one of the things I try to convey when I talk about this or in our book is like, that's okay. Like, I often feel like there's shame around poor financial decision making that people won't even ask for help. They won't talk about it. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, all of us make mistakes. All of us fail to think about opportunity costs because that's like a giant cognitive lift to think about what else could this coffee be, 20 years in the future. That's too much. And that's okay that we make that mistake. What we try to do in the book is then explain the various traps we fall into, the various ways we don't think about opportunity costs, so that those of us that have particular spending problems can then try to correct those.
What's an example of that?
The relativity is the most common one, or the one that resonates. And that's just the idea of why do we fall for sale prices, right? Why do we buy a sweater that's $60 marked down from $100 more frequently than we buy a $60 sweater? It's because we can look at that first one, the $100 sweater that's now $60, and we can compare, we can use relativity to say, well, the $60 sweater is a better deal than the $100 sweater, so it must be a good deal, right? That's just a mental shortcut that feels good, right? It touches our emotions, and we're like, wow, we're making a smart choice. Whereas just a $60 sweater on its own, in order to assess that value, we'd have to do some sort of opportunity cost thinking. And so instead of doing that hard thought, we go to the easy thing, which is like, a sale price or a comparison.
This is a good deal.
And we fall for that all the time.
Easily, yes.
And
I had a previous guest, Donnie Lichtenstein, one of my colleagues, studies pricing and promotion and so on. And he studies it, and he admits he loves a good sale.
All the time.
He loves a good deal.
All the time.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of the challenges with the book.
I mean, I have to I don't want to pass over that.
Yeah.
The man studies it.
But he's
like, man, I love a good deal.
Yeah.
And that is how compelling it is. Because even the person with the cheat code
still
struggles.
Well, because it touches these emotions. I mean, that we so often don't think about emotions as having to do with money decisions, right? We think of money, I think, as like just spreadsheets and numbers, and it's to the decimal point, and it's just raw calculation. But it's not. I mean, those decisions are so emotionally driven to feel good. I mean, we tell the story of JCPenney. JCPenney's whole model was overpriced stuff that then people could go and find discounts on, and they feel good, and they ended up paying the same as the other store. Then they changed CEOs and just priced them the regular prices, and people
went away. Yeah, that's right.
And then they went back to the old model. People came back.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's like they didn't care that they loved that. And it's because it was this emotional stuff. And we could spin into just the bleakness of the world, but it's a beautiful sunny day. So,
to what degree do you think? So obviously I have shtick to business on the brain.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I talk about is how authentic comedians are. How they talk about the things that people aren't willing to talk about. And that makes for entertaining comedy, and novelty, which is necessary for good comedy. One of the things that I think that the average person doesn't do very well is talk about money. So even among friends and family, and I don't know how much of this is an American thing, a cultural thing, or a universal thing, but people's unwillingness to talk about their financial situation is, I think, a problem.
Absolutely.
So I want to get your opinion about that. For example, I have a couple friends who, middle age now, they're getting a little too old to be as in debt as they are, and it's not the kind of classic quote unquote good debt. Right. So it's not mortgage debt, or it's not even like educational debt. It's just straight up like credit card debt, traveling kind of thing. Yeah. And these are people I'm close with, and they know that I love them and care about them. And, but I don't know how much money they owe.
Yeah.
They won't tell me. And I haven't straight up asked. And, and I think that's a little bit of a problem, because if anyone in the world could know or should know, it's probably me, right, in the sense that we are close, we're confidants, and I want to help. You know what I mean? I'm pretty judge free. Look, I might tease them a little bit here or there. You know what I mean? It comes from a place of love, but But for the most part, like I want to talk about these things because I don't want them to be 45-year-olds in this kind of debt. I mean, like we can handle that. I just don't want them to be 65-year-olds with that much debt plus the 15% they're paying on top of that kind of thing. And so I'm just curious, like, what is your reaction to that? Have you thought about this issue? You know, have you written about it?
Yeah. It's a great point. And I think one of the things that drives me to still, obviously to write the book, but to still talk about these things is my previous delusions included, like, I'm going to stop people from cheating by writing a cheating book. And one of my delusions now is that I and others can help people have conversations about money, because that's the biggest problem I think we face is whether it's the shame I mentioned earlier, or just a sense we think, oh, all our neighbors have saved for retirement. Like, we don't talk about it, whether it's with neighbors or families. It's, religion, politics, and money. People don't talk about. There was a survey that,
well, people talk about politics now.
Well, yeah, they do now. They kind of have to now. It's not always constructive. But even then, people are like, you shouldn't bring it up, and, don't bring it up at work, or, I don't have
just on Twitter, Jeff.
Exactly. Which one of my feeds are you following? I have the safe feed for people that want to pay me, and the one for people that don't. There is a survey that men in America were more willing to discuss whether or not they use Viagra than how much they save for retirement. And it's like, what's more embarrassing, your like teeny tiny little ineffective like savings account, or your other thing?
Teeny tiny ineffective little.
That's a classic comedy structure, by the way, for those taking notes at home. Peter didn't laugh at first because his face was so covered in amusement.
Well, also I'm too detached. I'm dissecting the joke as you're making it.
You are. I am a frog that you are dissecting, dead frogs. But the point being that you're right. You're absolutely right, and I think it's a huge problem that people don't talk about money within any, like, it's the number one cause of problem just within marriages, right? Is money, and it's often not necessarily disagreements about money, but I believe, and this is speculation, not science-based, that it's the difficulty of talking about it within relationships. And then you don't talk about with family or close friends, et cetera. And I would love it if there's a way to change that. I think one of the challenges, and I was thinking of this as you were telling your story, is you say that you can give, objective advice and it'll be fine. But money, because it is like emotional and it has to do like with our future and ourselves, and like often in particularly American culture, our self-worth. There's so much emotion there that I think it can be a challenge to talk about it with people that we know and connected to.
That's fair.
Because I'm not saying you shouldn't, but that's not about you. But a piece of advice that Dan and I give people about working through their spending problems is to go through their monthly credit card bill with someone and like explain why you made each purchase.
Oh, interesting.
But don't do that with your spouse, right? Don't do that with someone you're connected to, because there's other emotions there besides just that financial thing. And here is the challenge, is like, where do you turn for financial advice? If not to your friends and family, do you like go on the internet, look for like the Charles Schwab guy down the street? Like, what do you do?
Well, yeah. I mean, I certainly am a big proponent of a fee-based financial planner, someone you pay by the hour.
Right, as opposed to a percent of
the idea to pay someone 1% of your
it's crazy.
Of your is
conflict of interest out the walls
is so crazy to me. First of all, it's not a good value. Second of all, it doesn't make any sense to me why two people who have one person has half the amount of wealth and the other person pays half as much for the same advice. It's the whole model is complete bullshit. But paying someone by the hour in the same way that you may pay a therapist by the hour, to me, is, if you can find the right person, is an incredibly good value, and probably the best person to sit and go through your. Right.
I think the financial advising industry doesn't do a good. Well, I don't want a blanket statement. I know a couple of people that are good, but in general, it feels like they don't do a good job of presenting themselves as advisors. They seem more like salespeople.
Yes.
To that point you're making about the model, and I think there's a knowledge of, like, I know myself, like, as my financial like life has changed, and from comedy to now, it's all over the place. Like, who do I talk to? Like, there's really no one in the same situation, let alone all these other, like, emotional things. And I wish that there was someone easy.
I have someone for you. I'll put you in touch with her.
Excellent. What's your referral take on that?
It's free. I'm happy to give her the work. Yeah, I think that's right. It's interesting because I've been working with her, well, now for more than 15 years. So when I got my job at the University of Colorado, I don't really remember how, I think I got her name through a referral. She's kind of guided me through a variety of decisions, big and small, from, the death of a parent, purchasing a home, making retirement decisions, et cetera. Yeah. And even still, like, for as rational as I can be with money, I still have moments of irrationality. So I'll give you my example of this. Sometimes I'm making, like, let's say I'm making a big decision. For example, I was, I'm going to be doing a leave of absence. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually going to be stepping away from academia for a year. So I'm not going to be a professor. I'm not going to be collecting a paycheck.
Thank goodness.
So I know. I'm calling it a mini retirement. And so, that of course brings up a bunch of issues. You're going to be without income for a year or uncertain income. I'll be doing speaking and so on. And oftentimes when it comes to a decision like this, she'll ask me, what's my burn rate? Mm-hmm. How much are you spending on average a month between all these things? And I say, I don't know. And I'm not going to tell you. Like, I'm not going to figure it out.
Are you afraid of knowing? Is that why you're...
You know what it is that I could have told you my burn rate for most of my life to the penny. Mm-hmm. Like, I just had so little money. I had to track every little
I found people in scarcity are much more aware of their financial decisions than people that
live in a world of abundance.
Because they have to.
That's right. And so I've been fortunate enough in life to earn a decent income, and also not to have adjusted my consumption to a commensurate fashion. Good. Simply put, throwing out all the jargon for the people listening, at the end of the year, I have money left over in my checking account. Or, at the end of every month, on average, not every month, but let's say 8 out of the 12 months a year, I don't outspend my income.
Damn Christmas.
What's that?
Damn Christmas always getting you.
Yeah. And so, look, how wonderful is that? Like, I realize I'm part of a small percentage of people in the world. Look, it helps that I'm a simple man. I kind of bought everything I kind of needed in my 30s and early 40s. And the other thing is I don't have children. We know how expensive they are.
If you want to experiment, you can borrow mine. I'm going to send you the bills.
And so I've just taken this kind of personal, emotional decision, which is I just don't want to track it anymore. I just don't want to do it. So it complicates some of these decisions in that kind of way. But the point is that's an emotional thing. It's just me being impish. It's just me being like, I just don't want to do that anymore. I had to do it so much. I didn't like having to do it. And I just want to kind of enjoy my life a little bit more.
Which is that speaks to an important balance that I always try to tell people. Like, our book talks about all these things, all these mistakes we make, and has all these suggestions for things you could do better. But underlying it all is, like, unless you have to budget to the penny, don't ruin your life by being a stress case. Choose your spots, if you will. Choose your biggest. I spend too much on shoes. Figure out why that is. Set up a system to stop that.
I see.
But don't stress about everything. Don't stress about the $5 latte, because it is an emotional burden. And it sounds like for you, it's like you had that burden for so long. You want to just enjoy your life, essentially. And you could be you, or the generic you could be that person that pinches every penny and puts budget items. Or you can find where it matters.
I have good rules. I do have good rules,
whether you call it discretionary spending or you rainy day fund, whatever it is, don't kill yourself over it unless, you have to.
Yeah. I think the problem with a lot of advice, whether it be, professional advice, fitness advice, whatever it is that there's almost never a one size fits all model. It should be tailored to the specific problems that people have. The issue, though, is that most people have the same problem.
Right.
And so the average person is not saving enough.
Right.
However, there's a small group of people out there who are saving too much.
Yeah.
And that's fine if they're not
might have
missing out.
Right.
But some of them are missing out.
Right.
Right. Some of them could be enjoying their life. Like I like to say is, well, you work so hard.
Right.
If you can afford it, you might as well enjoy yourself a little bit more. Again, the average person can't afford to enjoy their life a little bit more. Actually, the average person should be enjoying their life a little bit less in order to enjoy their life a little bit more longer. 40 years from now.
Right. If you do it right, your cumulative life enjoyment, I'm picturing some strange looking formula in my head.
Yes, right.
Over your 65 years or whatever of being an adult will be greater if you spread it evenly. I don't know. There's some math.
Yeah. Let me run through my like little kind of checklist that I kind of follow and I give when I talk to people about this stuff, and you tell me what I'm missing.
Okay.
So the first step is
wrong. Sorry,
the first step is basically pay off your credit cards and other similar debt like that.
Yeah.
Right? That's number one.
Because those are the high interest ones.
Number two, create an emergency fund. Let's say 6 months salary that just sits in a money market account. Number three, start investing in tax vehicles, 401ks, IRAs, etc. Number four is optional, and that's buy a house. If you're going to be in that house for 5 or more years, so you're going to be settled down. Mm-hmm. B, you don't have any real aspirations to be entrepreneurial.
You don't need the cash, in other words.
What's that?
You don't need that cash, in other words. If
that's right. I mean, the opportunity cost of buying a house is great.
Right.
Number five, begin investing in post-tax dollars in equities and other investments. That's a very long conversation, which we won't have. No. But the reason for that is that you can then, after you retire, minimize your tax hit by blending your withdrawals. That's a very complicated issue. We don't have time for that. And then after that, almost no one ever gets there. And that probably would be something like investing in, again, lowering your tax rate, like municipal bonds and other things that are, you know what I mean?
I also think it's important to find an author or comedian to support, sort of like an old patron model. It's a really feels charitable. It improves the world. Like to do that.
That's funny. So what do you think of that kind of step by step?
I feel like I just got into a podcast called Trolling Jeff Kriesler for all of the things that he's done wrong. I think it's valid, and you know, I don't put myself in the business of that level of specificity and advice. Sure. But what I recognize in that is it's essentially looking at the absolute dollar amounts as opposed to like the percentages and everything. Like credit cards have this high percentage, high interest rate. Yeah. So it means we're losing a lot of money. It's about when you're thinking long term,
prioritizing the dollars you spend.
Right. One of the great things I think that's happened, I can't remember when it was, but when they started putting on credit card bills, if you just pay the minimum, this is how much you'll pay.
Yes.
And so you have like $1,000 credit card bill, and you see if you just pay the minimum, you're going to end up paying $15,000 over however many years. That ability to see for everyone to see the impact of that percentage rate, I think is huge.
Yeah, it nudges people to that more rational set of behaviors.
Because then you see that, as you've ranked it here, that 15, 17% credit card debt, it really matters. It adds up. Like you hear stories now as the student loan crisis goes on, the debt's not that high, but people talk about they've been paying their student loan for 15 years and they still have the same amount due. So I think the ability to think and put in absolute dollars over time what your debts and potential earnings are is the key. And the prioritization that you've created kind of looks at that. Mm-hmm. It says stop losing money quickly.
Yes.
Then make sure that you're in a place where you don't have to go back to the emergency fund is make sure you don't have to do like a payday loan, right? Yes. If something happens, you don't lose money. And then once you kind of hit that equilibrium, zero level, then start building up in a way that's responsible and gives you flexibility so that you can continue to, do what you want. While it begins by like, the automatic withdrawals from your job, or the 401k, the stuff that's tax deferred. You don't have to think about, you don't have to research. Essentially, you can check a box at your HR department.
Yeah, it's sort of hidden savings.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you get to the big, and when you're at a place where you could buy a home, you're at the place then when you can like catch your breath and think about it. You're not at like a pressure point. So in that way, I think the structure is great. It's laid out in a way that's like, you can look at where you are. If you've got 20 grand in credit card debt, a house, and tax-free municipal bonds are not on the radar.
No, right? That's right. Yeah, that's right. The house thing's a real problem. I think the average person should not be buying a home.
Right.
Let's switch over to people science.
Sure.
So how'd that happen?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Well, it's interesting when you were talking about the one size fits all that people often think about with advice.
Yes.
What people science is about the future of applied behavioral science, broadly speaking. And we have academics and researchers that write about their latest work. We have practitioners that have put these ideas into practice successfully and unsuccessfully, and journalists and myself that sort of write about what are these principles. And it's meant to be an accessible place for anyone that's sort of curious about what behavioral science is, right? Maybe they've read Dan's book, or maybe they haven't, and they just hear about this buzz. And so it's a place to get sort of a 360-degree look at what it's all about. What have people tried? And the big lesson that I keep reiterating both to my writers and the readers is, and it's a challenge for behavioral science, even as we mentioned earlier, it's grown and people are more involved with it, is there isn't one size fits all, right? It's the science thing. It's contextual. It's you take this principle, this idea that maybe worked for like an O-Power. That's some company that people know is a big example. So you look at that, what they did, and then you have to like design it and experiment and pilot it for your particular situation.
Right.
And I'm excited by that. My dad was a physicist, and like, I don't know if I ever explicitly thought of myself as a scientist, but that process that like, hey, let's try something. It might fail, but let's see what we can learn. I love that. And I think as behavioral science is being more looked at to like solutions, and often off the rack solutions, that's a conflict, because businesses, except for the Netflix of the world that can carve off 1 million people to experiment, they don't want pilots to fail, right? There's often a push to make sure it works. So I'm getting a little astray to what people science is about, but for me, it's about telling people, it's like this, we call it a dinner conversation with like some of your smart friends.
I see.
And for me, every time I talk to a potential contributor or a reader, I say underlying it all is this like responsible science of, we're not like listing off the silver bullets. Right. We're telling you what people are doing, what's going on. And then it's up to you then to like find a PhD to work with, or whatever the next step is.
So what's an example of a kind of successful article that you like from People Science?
There are a ton. We have a series called Know Your Nuggets, which is just about these little nuggets, like behavioral principles, like relativity or the IKEA effect,
I see.
Endowed progress. And it just sort of explains what it is and provides some context. And people love that as a quick explainer.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm doing a thing which I love to do with you, which I'm called origin stories.
Okay.
Because it's just about like superheroes. How do people that are working in behavioral science get there? Because I would say everybody above age 30, let's use as a cutoff, when we went to college or went to school,
this didn't exist.
Right.
Yeah.
And so how did we wander around to get there? I mean, my route is crazy, right? Like I was a lawyer and then a comedian. Now I'm whatever. That's a series that we're launching. And then just some articles that are like the surprising stuff, the impact, the incentivizing or lack thereof of money as a motivating force.
Yes. That
is fascinating to me as we learn, particularly within organizations, that higher pay doesn't mean people are more engaged. Yes. Right? And there's obviously a level you have to hit of, being able to survive, but then like purpose and meaning and these things that I believe in the past we may have thought of as like soft science or sort of woo-woo, whatever your term, we're seeing more and more. No, that really does matter.
I think that matters. I mean, I've actually always been a person who hasn't done the work for the money. And when I started caring about the money, my life got worse.
That was me with law. That was the reason for me when I was in law school to take a job that paid $150,000 at age 24 is because it paid $150,000, nothing else. And my privilege was knowing I didn't need to take that I'd be okay. I recognize that. But like, I just saw my future of being miserable because there wasn't another reason to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. On day one of my MBA course, I teach the Perma model of well-being. Basically, It's a model of the different paths to living a good life. And it's sort of surprising. I mean, obviously, like, I think good health underlies most paths, but having lots of money doesn't.
Right.
It underlies some, but not all of those paths. And so you can live a really good life with a pretty low burn rate if you're so inclined.
Yeah.
So I want to wrap up, and I asked this of everyone, and you can give more people science answers if you want. But what do you, Jeff? What are you reading, watching, or listening to that's really great, that really stands out?
That is a loaded question, and it's a challenge for me. My entire career / adult life is I don't consume enough.
I don't think that's a problem.
Okay. All right. Well,
actually, I think that I've been on this.
You know what I'm saying?
No. This has been a theme in this podcast.
Right.
Is that the average person consumes too much and doesn't create enough. Yeah. And so if you're a little out of whack in the opposite way, that you're creating and not consuming enough, I think that's a pretty minor problem to have. It is a problem in the sense that it's like not feeding you enough, but
So thank you for that permission to not be consuming. And my challenge is that it's not that I don't believe there's great value, like in all the comedians and the music and everything. It's just that like I don't get into it. So like shows, it's not like I think you're a bad person because you watch Game of Thrones. I just don't have time to get into it.
I've never watched I've watched one episode of Game of Thrones, and it didn't make any sense to me.
Right. It might be fun. I just haven't jumped in. And part of the issue is also I'm a Scorpio and I don't do stuff half-assed. So it's like I'm going to obsess. So if I'm going to start Game of Thrones, I'm going to be gone for a week.
I see.
So I've always been into jazz. I think if I could have had my fingers match my mind, I played jazz saxophone for many years. I would still be doing that, I think. Okay. And I've lately gotten back into Motown.
Oh, fun.
And I just I don't know. It's just some touch. And my son, I have
Is there a particular artist that you've been listening to?
It's often like just a Pandora type mix. And it's like whatever comes along, I feel like, oh yeah, I love that song, even if I've never heard it before.
And it's, the music, it holds up.
Yeah. And I think some of it's like an age and a personal situation. Like my oldest kid is about to turn 8. He's 7. And like we listen to music and he'll sing it. And we had this one moment, which I can't decide if it was awesome or not. In the morning, we had listened to Ooh Child by whoever you know. Ooh Child, things are gonna get easier. Yes. Which is just this beautiful song. And I often listen to it in the morning. And he and I listen to it. And oftentimes throughout the day or later in the day, like he might sing a line or two. And as it happened in this day, he had some stuff going on in school that was bothering him. And we had this, like a tough talk about friends and whatever.
This is shaping up to be like an after school special story.
So we like have this tough emotional thing such as 7-year-olds do. And like I close his bedroom door and I just hear real quiet, ooh, child, things are gonna get easier. And I was like, and I don't know that he connected it as like, I need this music to fix me, but it was just, it was so heartbreaking.
I think that's lovely.
Yeah, no, it was great. Heartbreaking things are beautiful. If they didn't break your heart, they wouldn't be powerful.
That's really fun. Well, that's fantastic. I think that I'm not sure we can top that story.
No, let's not.
And with that, I'll say, Jeff, finally get to meet you. Been almost as good as I expected it would be.
Excellent. Same. Almost as good.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to visit petermcgraw.org for more information about our guest, show notes, and social media links. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share with others. Join Dr. Peter McGraw next week for another fun, fascinating conversation on I'm Not Joking.